Hi everybody, this is Vince with Average Joe Drinks.
And I'm Eddie, and today we're here to give you a quick and dirty AJD tip. Now Vince, we've made some drinks with whiskey along the way and some bourbon. And today we're going to talk about some of the differences between whiskeys and bourbons. This is not going to be a really in-depth informational video on how bourbon is made, because that
would take a long time.
It'd take too long, and it's not really important. It's not what we're looking for. What we are going to tell you about is the different flavor profiles and just some of the distinct differences between whiskeys and bourbons. First off, the definition of whiskey is a spirit distilled with fermented grain. So one of the things to understand is that every single bourbon is a whiskey. Every single whiskey is not a bourbon. So whiskey is really the top level, and then you've got branches of whiskey and bourbon that kind of come off of that. So to help understand, this is a bourbon, and a bourbon is a little bit sweeter. And part of that's because in order to be called a bourbon, it has to be at least 51% corn mash. It has to be made in the United States, and it has to be aged in new charred oak barrels. So what gives it the sweetness is going to be the corn mash. 51% minimum corn mash to be called a bourbon made in the United States. The next one that we used a couple times is a rye whiskey. 51% rye. That's what makes a rye whiskey. It's the same thing, same kind of aged in the same barrels. Also made in the United States.
So it has to be a new barrel.
New charred oak barrels is specific to making the whiskey, the rye whiskey. So sweeter, a little bit more of a bite. So if you're looking for a whiskey that's kind of a little bolder and can kind of hold up to the flavor, look for maybe a rye. If you like a sweeter whiskey, go towards a bourbon. And next we have a Tennessee whiskey. And strangely enough, it has to be made in Tennessee. Other than that, it's a bourbon.
Is that like a Canadian whiskey supposed to come from Canada?
Exactly. And an Irish whiskey.
Okay, I think I follow. I'm tracking you.
That's how we roll. So a Tennessee whiskey is a bourbon because it has to have at least 51% corn mash, but it also has to be made in Tennessee. And the distinction that people in Tennessee they make their whiskey is that they filter it all through a maple charcoal. So they kind of
have their own way of doing it.
Yeah, they have their own way of doing it, and it's almost a pride thing where we're not a regular bourbon, we're a Tennessee whiskey. So that's what a Tennessee whiskey is. Again, going to be a little sweet because of the maple charcoal and because of the corn mash. Now next we have an Irish whiskey, which you made in Irish coffee, which is very tasty. And strangely enough, an Irish whiskey must be made in Ireland. It's fairly simple, I know. The difference is it actually has to be aged at least 3 years.
It does taste different too. It does.
And they're a lot smoother.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so that's one of the flavor profiles, and that's really the importance, I think, of understanding the difference. Sweeter bourbon, a little bit more of a bite, rye whiskey, a smooth whiskey. Both the Irish whiskey and the Canadian whiskey both need to be aged for at least 3 years. They both are made in their respective regions, Canada, Canadian whiskey, and they're made in wooden casks. They don't have the charred oak barrels, they're just a wooden cask.
So what about, you hear about these whiskeys made in oak casks imported from France that were used to age red wine? Does that affect what you can?
It affects what you can call it, because you still have to have those strict requirements, whether they be location specific, whether they be what the mash is, or how long they're aged. So
is it enforced? Like if I went into the whiskey business and I put the wrong thing on my label?
I think they would shoot you.
Oh wow, the other whiskey makers?
Yeah, they would. I don't know about how they enforce that, but that's a good question. But in order for you to legally call yourself a bourbon, you have to meet the requirements for a bourbon.
I'm a bourbon.
You are a bourbon because you call yourself a bourbon. So there's the Canadian whiskey and an Irish whiskey. If you're looking for the flavor profile, it's a smooth whiskey. That's why an Irish coffee goes well, because you get the bitterness of the coffee and a smooth whiskey comes alongside of it, and it makes for a good tasting drink. Yeah. Sweeter, bourbon in Tennessee. You got a bite. You want the rye whiskey, something that's got a bold flavor that's going to hold up to some of the other flavors if you're going to make a cocktail. And then lastly, you've got, which we don't have here because I don't drink Scotch. Nothing wrong with it, I just don't, is Scotch. Made in England. No, it has to be made in Scotland. That's one of the biggest things. So Scotch has to be made in Scotland. It has to be aged at least 3 years, and they're a lot stronger of a flavor. And that's where you start getting into the single malt whiskeys. You got your grain whiskey and your blended whiskey. And those can get really, really expensive. And that's probably why I don't drink
some good ones.
I mean, I was just looking at one, $240 for a bottle of single malt whiskey.
Yeah, my dad wouldn't drink one unless it was Glenfiddich. Otherwise, he didn't think it was worth his time.
That's a good point. So that's kind of some of the differences between bourbons and whiskeys. Another kind of interesting thing is how to drink it. And some of the Scotch drinkers may get mad at me for saying this, but if it's just a regular Scotch, like a blended Scotch or a grain Scotch, that's going to be on the rocks. A single malt Scotch, though, is going to be drinking neat or without ice. And some people say it's weak to put a little bit of water in there, but some people do like water in their Scotch. So that's the way you can drink those particular drinks. Everything else, your bourbons, your Irish whiskeys, your Tennessee whiskeys, those are what you're going to put in with your cocktails and with your mixers. So that's pretty much the idea behind the different types of bourbons and whiskeys. And really, again, it's not a video to get really in depth on bourbons and whiskeys. Oh my goodness! Even just understanding the distilling process and the different type of distills that they use and how often they do it. It's almost too much for, I think, this show. But understanding the flavor profile helps you pick out what kind of drink you want to make.
There you go. So don't buy an expensive single malt to mix into
A whiskey sour or anything like that. Exactly. That's exactly right. Use a good rye whiskey or even a bourbon, but certainly not a Scotch.
Because you're just wasting your money.
You are wasting your money. And if you're going to get a single malt Scotch, try it neat first. So there it is. That's just the tip.